Hello, friends. Welcome back to the show. Today, I spoke to Allison Evans, who is a co-founder of Branch Basics, a non-toxic cleaning company. And Allison and her family, this is a family business, have just the craziest healing story from non-toxic living. And we talk all about that, the power of the innate intelligence and wisdom of the body and how it can heal if you get out of the way. And we really dive in on the toxins in our homes, in our environments, our cleaning products, fragrances, pans, microplastics. We talk about infertility. We talk about her lifelong struggle with PCOS and how she overcame that and is now pregnant again with a fourth child, a mom of three, thriving, mold. We covered so much here that's really practical and really hopeful at the same time, so you can dial in your homes, make them toxin free, protect your health and your family's health, and learn how to do it and the surprising impacts of not doing so on your health. So let's dive into the show with Allison. Really fun one. We'll see you there. Allison, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you today. My wife was very excited I was going to be talking to you, as I'm sure a lot of our listeners are going to be incredibly excited afterwards to scour their homes and get rid of all of the hidden toxins. You have quite a fascinating story, and it's really empowering and surprising and a little bit shocking. So let's start there. Tell me the whole journey, your battle with PCOS, your Aunt Miralee, and what happened to the family and how Branch Basics came to be. The floor is yours.
Yes. Okay. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. So excited to be here. I was just saying off air, this accent, I feel like I'm being transported to, Australia or New Zealand, all the things. And I have so many New Zealand supplements in my body right now. I'm being fully immersed
Let's go.
inside and
Let's go. Amazing.
out. So yeah, so my story, I guess really the story of Branch Basics and how we started. For any of you guys who are listening and are not familiar, I co-founded a non-toxic cleaning product company called Branch Basics with my aunt Marilee and my best friend Kelly. And we've been at this for a while, well over a decade, which is crazy. But we never set out to sell soap. So we always say, in fact, we pretty much should have sent ourselves to business school 3 times with all the expensive mistakes we've made at this point. So I can assure you we did not set out to sell soap. But our story really started when I was in middle school. So I had my first menstrual cycle and then never came back again. In high school, I saw a fertility specialist here in Houston, Texas, and he diagnosed me with the worst case of PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome. Unfortunately, most people know what PCOS is.
Mm-hmm.
When we first started out, I had to explain what that was. But um, it was one of the worst cases he had ever seen in his practice. My ovaries were completely covered with cysts. And I didn't really have any symptoms other than amenorrhea and maybe a little bit of acne, but why not just take some Accutane for that and, get on birth control while you're at it. And, back then, this was 2003 for me. They didn't understand the lifestyle component of polycystic ovarian syndrome. It was very much, this is what you have. You take birth control indefinitely. You will not be able to conceive naturally, but we will have the best fertility treatments for you when you are ready to have a baby. So I, at that time, and listen, I have so much respect for doctors, surgeons. I do not know what we would do without them. But at that time, they were God to me. I mean, if you had a white coat, you knew it all.
Mm-hmm.
There was no questioning. And I really owned that diagnosis. And this was a few years before I understood that we actually need to be our own advocates and that we should ask questions and that we should fight for our health. Everything that the medical community tells us is true. In fact, a lot of it's not. Most of it's not sometimes. So yeah, like I said, I owned it, went off to college, met Kelly, my best friend, and on the outside, still taking my birth control and my Accutane and all the things. But I started coming down with, let's see, it started off as kind of like, oh, my shoulders are kind of sore. Maybe I slept wrong. And then it went down to my back. So I was getting, regular PT and acupuncture and Rolfing. And it really became this thing. I'm like, gosh, I'm in so much pain all the time. What's going on? I'm healthy. I mean, this is bizarre. I've never had anything in my life like this. So by my, let's see, spring of my sophomore year, I was registered as a student with disabilities because I couldn't sit through class. I was now doing regular steroid injections. I was on hydrocodone twice a day. I was on muscle relaxers and sleeping pills, antidepressants.
Wow.
Because I couldn't sleep because of the pain. I was sleeping on ice packs that would quite literally burn my skin to the point of I would wake up with blood on my sheets because the pain from the ice was better than the pain in my body. And this was even on painkillers. So my body was just out of control, going downhill, and nobody understood why. So I was this kind of medical mystery. I was, EKGs and MRIs and CAT scans and x-rays. And I mean, you name it, I did it. And trigger point therapy up in Philadelphia, arthritis specialist. So no one could say I wasn't doing it all. And this was about the time that my Aunt Marilee came into the picture. And she is my real aunt, not just an endearing term. But I didn't know her super well at this time. She had some health issues herself, and then her son, which I would later explain, was also struggling with some health issues. So she lived out in the Texas Hill Country. She didn't have a cell phone. She wasn't super social. They kind of did their own thing. And in my mind, I'm like, I don't know. They're like making their own food, and they don't use toxic. They use, regular soap or something to do their laundry. I don't know what's going on over there. But I finally had ears to hear her, and she called me one day. And I was really at rock bottom. And she started explaining to me that the body has the ability to heal no matter what it's going through. And that if there are symptoms like the ones that are manifesting in my body, those are sirens going off. And to continue to give the body these medications is really to basically take the fire alarm battery out, but not address the fire. So it made sense to me. And at the same time, I was like, okay, but I've seen the best people, in the nation, and they can't figure me out. So I don't really know what you have for me here. But she starts asking me about my diet. I'm like, no one's asked me about my diet. She starts asking me about my home products, whether I recently moved, whether I recently remodeled, because all of the toxic materials that can come with that. Later, looking back, I realized that a lot of my symptoms started actually when I moved into a brand new apartment, ridden with all the formaldehyde and the fresh paint, windows that didn't open, and the toxic carpet. I mean, you name it. But as much as what she was saying sounded crazy, it was actually the very first time that there was something that I could do. Every single other person that had come into my life to try to help me never asked me anything about my lifestyle. It was all about genetics. It was about symptoms. It was about drugs that I was on, things that other, doctors had asked me or told me. And I thought, man, there's like a glimmer of hope here. I mean, there is something I can do. So I thought, okay, as crazy as this sounds, like I am all in. I'm at rock bottom. There's nothing, there's nowhere else for me to turn. So I started flipping over the, labels, my boxes of cereal and the Splenda and the 100-calorie packs. And I'm like, for the very first time, I am reading ingredients at 20 years old, shocking. And I got rid of my Windex, and I got rid of the paint cans that were still laying around, and the dryer sheets and the candles. And I could only do so much because I'm living in a sorority house with other girls at the time. But I noticed pretty immediately that I was actually able to drop down on doses of painkillers. And I was definitely seeing shifts in my body. And I thought, okay, she's onto something here. So Kelly's my roommate at the time. She's been watching me now for a couple of years, and she is like, wow, this is the very first time Allison has really seen a shift. So she and I, it's just funny how some people are attracted to things like this and some people aren't. She's a twin sister who also lived with us, and she was like, y'all are kind of crazy. I'm so glad Allison's better, but not really interested in this. Kelly is like latched on. So graduation's approaching. graduation from college, and we decided we're going to go live with Marilee in the hill country. So we call her up, and she's like, "Okay, this is the craziest ask ever. This must be God. I don't know, but sure, come live with me for 8 weeks."
Mm-hmm.
So little did she know that those 8 weeks would completely change our lives. So we go out there. And I want to stop here and diverge a little bit, because if I don't tell you about Marilee's story, none of this really makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So really quickly, there's two catastrophic events that happened in Marilee's life that led her to where she was when we moved to her home. In her 20s, she grew up here in Houston, Texas, just like me. She was told she needed a kidney transplant, and she was sick all the time, fevers of unknown origin. No one could figure her out. They did all these kind of really invasive kind of diagnostic type surgeries. And she discovered food as medicine during this really critical time period. And she basically looked at the doctors and said, "I respect you, but I will not remove my kidney. I'm going to see if there's something else that I can do about this." So for 10 days only, she ate only real food. She got rid of every single processed food, every excitotoxin, every additive, every pesticide, and just got back to basics. And at the end of those 10 days, she had her kidney numbers were completely different. She avoided dialysis. She has not been on a prescription drug since, and she, I believe, is now 74 at this point.
Wow.
So it's amazing. So fast forward a couple decades later, she has a 10-year-old son, my first cousin. He was exposed to chlordane, which is a now banned pesticide at school. Overnight, he went from this intelligent and obedient and joyful and athletic and strong and healthy boy to can't walk a straight line, can't spell a 3-letter word.
Wow.
He is so sensitive, you had to whisper to even speak to him. His lymph nodes would swell like BBs if he came in contact with any sort of chemical. So nearly they sought the absolute best doctors, post war veterans who had gone through chemical exposures like this, and toxicologists and such. They basically said, you have to have 16 shots a day, keep him comfortable. He's going to be a bubble boy for the rest of his life. Once again, Marilee had that same feeling rise up. This is not his story. I respect you and I respect where you're coming from, but we're going to figure this out. So the first catastrophe led her to food as medicine, opened her eyes to the power of our diet. The second one filled that whole other, I would even say 50% kind of missing piece that people still aren't understanding, and it is that of our environment. So we can have this perfect diet. But if we are coming home to a house full of pesticides and synthetic fragrances and using scented trash bags and dryer sheets and sleeping on pillowcases with fragrances, we're just not able to uptake and utilize those minerals of our diet. And we're constantly asking our body to detoxify this just barrage of chemicals. So over the next 7 years, she said if she only knew what she knew now, it probably would have been only a year or so. But it basically took 7 years. She had to keep removing certain chemicals from the house. And finally, when she completely cleared her home of toxic chemicals, they had to live outside in a tent, actually, for a couple of years.
Wow.
Because he was so chemically sensitive, he couldn't come inside. But once she had removed that very last box that she thought, oh, there's no way. It was her favorite perfumes and cleaning products. And she was out in the tent one night. And she thought, okay, what am I missing? How can he be outside and not inside? She went in, removed the box. The next day, he comes in for lunch. He usually could only stay inside about 7 to 10 minutes, or he would get super agitated and have to go out. And he said, "Mom, what did you do? I don't feel any different." And it was that one box that was behind a door. She thought, there's no way this is going to make a difference. And so she was going down the grocery store aisle a couple of days later, and she went down the cleaning products aisle, and it just dawned on her, okay, if these products are closed shut and unused, and I can smell them on a parts per million, billion, trillion level in my home, that little box is creating this chemical soup. And someone like Douglas is super, super sensitive and immunocompromised, is going to be affected by that at a really small amount. So after that, that was really the crux of his recovery. He ended up being the first homeschool child to graduate from the United States Naval Academy. Wow. And he was top of his class physically and intellectually. It was just an amazing story. So that is the home that I am now entering when I come in 2008. And it is completely free of every single toxic chemical. There is no fragrance. It's basically an extension of the outdoors. So for 8 weeks, I'm living in this home and my body is thriving. I could feel just every day I'm becoming more and more alive. I'm grounding. We are eating real food and rebounding, and we're off of our cell phones. We're doing all these crazy things that now everyone's doing. Using the sauna, and back then juice was orange juice, but we're drinking beets and carrots and kale and such. And sure enough, at the end of those 8 weeks, I was off all my medication.
Wow.
I was virtually pain-free. I ended up going to the same fertility doctor several months later, and the cysts are virtually all gone. My period ended up coming back naturally. I was off all birth control when I started working with Mary. And I wasn't even as strict at that time, but I understood, and I live the way that I live now. And I've done this now for 14 years. I mean, I avoid refined sugar. I eat organic almost all of the time. I don't eat out much, but I mean, for me, it is a boundary to my freedom. People always say, "Oh my gosh, how do you live this way? This sounds so restricting." I'm thinking, what's restricting? Doctor's visits and drugs and the ability to, not get out of your bed. I mean, those are the things that are restricting. So this to me is so much freedom, so much life. And so we've tried 3 times and gotten pregnant 4 times. So here I am, pregnant with my 4th child. And it's really just such a testimony to the power of pure and the things that we put in on and around our body. So the reason that we started Branch Basics was because we wanted to put Marilee's brain on the internet. After that summer, we thought, why didn't somebody tell me this? Like, how have we grown up in these, this conventional world from educated families, and we have paid all this money for education our entire lives and seen the best doctors. And this is the first time we're hearing that our bodies can heal in this way. Excuse me. So that's where we are now. And we're selling soap. And more importantly, we're really trying to sell the message of the power of pure, help people identify toxins, remove them from their homes, from their personal care products, from their supplements. Because it all matters. It's all going to the same place. And once we do that, our bodies are able to run in the direction of healing.
It's such an incredible story, yours and Marilee's and your cousins. I wonder when people listen to something like that, how much they'll resonate with just like these weird little things they can't quite get on the other side of. You said something I think is really important too, that I think a lot of people in our pipeline will start the health journey looking purely at the food, and only later will they become aware of the environmental exposures to toxins and things like you mentioned, like rugs that are off-gassing and cleaning products and what they're showering in and the water. But you have to complete the whole picture. And just so many things are clicking for me as you're speaking. Like, I went into the supermarket with my son the other day, and I was going down the aisle, and he said, "Ew, this is the stinky aisle." And he says that every time we go past lane number 4 or whatever it is with all those nasty cleaning products, like, "Ew, the stinky aisle." It's so, he's sensitive too. He smells it. He's got a really fine sense of smell, and it just reeks. And I live in a non-toxic home. I come out here to shoot the podcast. I go into these hotels and they're using fragrances, and it reeks. You get in an Uber and they've got the dangly things that are giving off the scents. Once you see it, you can't unsee it, right? And it makes so much sense. And another, to bring my wife back into the conversation, when we met, she had PCOS, she had ovarian cysts, she had invasive surgery on a nodule or a lymph node in her neck that was taken out to look at it. And she was always skinny, just like you. She was always healthy, quote unquote, from that viewpoint at least. But she was also not aware of any of this stuff. The perfume on every day, the underarm deodorants with heavy metals, the food, all of it. So I think this is really hopeful for people to hear the extreme cases of these stories, that you were told you were going to be infertile forever. You were told that this was your destiny. You were told that you were going to be on birth control forever. And here you are, naturally healing. Not just you, but I'm sure you see it now for people that are emailing in and DMing in, but also for your family, and now paying that forward. I think it's just really incredible. So what exactly are these toxins? I've heard you say that the cleaning industry, or the regulating bodies, is really, it's unregulated. Actually, it's like less than 1% are tested for safety, and then they end up in our homes, on our bodies, in our bodies. What's the when we say toxic living, what are some of the big hitters for you?
Right. We actually have a course that goes through 12 different, areas of the home. And we do order it in what we believe is the, most toxic, most important thing to look at first. Um, Loosely, I should say, because we have emotions at the end and emotions can be very toxic. But to answer your question, pesticides are number one. They are the absolute most horrific underminer of our health. And what's so horrible about them is that they are tasteless. You don't really smell them. You don't see them. They can be used on our food, in our homes, in the parks, put into our cleaning products. If you see a little EPA registration on the back of your cleaning product, there's a very good chance that that is a pesticide that is triggering that register number. Um, so they're really insidious. And pesticides include, lice treatment and weed killer and glyphosate that's used in Roundup. I mean, list goes on. But what a lot of times we don't realize that they're actually in most conventional cleaning products. So pesticides were originally designed for chemical warfare. And they just don't belong inside the home. There's never a need for them. We can even disinfect, and we can talk about that later. There's really not a reason to disinfect very often at all. But if you do, you don't even need a pesticide, alcohol and hydrogen peroxide. But we have been so conditioned to think that we have to have these kind of big hitters. So pesticides love fat. They seek lipid dense areas, and the fattiest part of our body is our brain. So that is why they are directly connected to things like Parkinson's and ALS and any sort of degenerative disease. But a lot of times, even things like brain fog and insomnia. I mean, think about the amount of people that say, "Oh, I'm healthy, I'm fine," and they're taking a thyroid medication, a sleeping pill. People can't sleep. It's nuts. I mean, there's lots of reasons for that, but I think the pesticides is a really big one. There's actually been a 28% increase in childhood cancer since pesticides were introduced into our products, which is just nuts. And so I think of a lot of children with behavioral disorders and learning disabilities, and those are the elderly people that are pregnant, especially if you're exposed to pesticides in your first or third trimester, there is a much greater risk of issues when the baby is born. So they are the number one thing to get out. If there is an EP registration number, caution, warning, or danger are EPA signal words. And so even though the cleaning product industry in many ways is completely unregulated, there are certain ingredients that when present trigger things like caution, warning, and danger, because you have to remember that there's no requirement for ingredients to be listed on your cleaning products. So number one thing we tell people, if there is a product in your home that doesn't have an ingredient list, get it out, because there is something that that the company is hiding. There is no way that a company using clean ingredients is not going to want to brag about it. So we always say, when in doubt, get it out. And so pesticides is number one. And then that leads me to a pretty close second, which is synthetic fragrances. And once you have a home that is free of synthetic fragrances, I love that story about your son, because I can't tell you how many times I've heard people smell the cleaning product aisle, and especially kids, and they actually like it. They think that it smells like, oh, this is the aisle that's clean. This is so it's interesting to come from a home that doesn't have those toxic chemicals, because my kids are the same way. We go into a freshly cleaned bathroom at a restaurant and they're like, oh my gosh. I mean, to them, it's worse than poop. I mean, they're just like, they can't even handle it. And I'm like, yeah, I raised you well. So it's all relative, right? In our minds, like what signals clean, what signals danger. And so the synthetic fragrances are also insidious. The nice thing about them is that they are pretty obvious. They're not like pesticides where you can't smell them. But I mean, goodness, I don't know. Do you have a daughter?
No,
I know you have
two boys.
Kids. Okay. I'm telling you, I have 3 girls under the age of 7, and it is almost a part-time job trying to identify the synthetic fragrances that sneak into my home through these girls, through party favorites, bath bombs, stickers and bookmarks that are scratch and sniff that they get at school. The shoes that girls are wearing now, a lot of them have been infiltrated. They kind of add this scent, like a vanilla scent. The
Wow.
baby doll that my daughter got for her 2-year-old birthday is a vanilla scented Madame Alexandra doll. I mean, it goes on. I don't know. I don't think it's I think it's a Corolla or something. But the point is, and it doesn't even say it on the website. It's just they just assume that people want these scents, and these synthetic fragrances. There's thousands of them. I think there's up to about 3,200 at this point, and they all are under the umbrella of the single word fragrance or parfum, Parfum. So now that you have gotten all the products out of your house without an ingredient list, you're now looking at the ones with an ingredient list. If you see the word fragrance or parfum, there are 100% present synthetic fragrances, and synthetic fragrances are directly linked to hormone disruption. And used to think, okay, it's just a little bit. It's just at the end of the ingredient list, But number one, how many little bits are throughout your house? How many little bits are you putting on your body and inhaling, throughout the day? But that was actually based on the old toxicology model of dose makes the poison. We used to think, okay, if it's just a little bit, we can have, we'll be totally fine as long as there's not a lot, right? Well, they've actually found, especially with synthetic fragrances and hormone disruptors, our hormonal system is so delicate and so sensitive that it actually takes one drop in an Olympic-sized pool to affect our body. That is the analogy of small of an exposure we have to actually turn on and off DNA expression, especially in our delicate, like I said, endocrine system. So there is no place for any synthetic fragrances. If you smell peppermint, you want to see the word peppermint oil. Lavender, if you want to see lavender oil. Sadly, now even the essential oils, most of them are cut with toxic solvents. And so we just want to make sure if we are feeling like we really need to use a scent and we need to use an essential oil, that we use solvent-free, wild-crafted, organic essential oils. And they can definitely play a part in healing if used in that way. But those two items, once you've gotten rid of the pesticides and the synthetic fragrances, you are well on your way to having gotten rid of most of the products in your home. And your home should actually be a place that is so much healthier. So those are the two things. You don't have to be a scientist. You don't have to have this intense, amount of knowledge to understand the products in your home. We think, oh, okay, well, the government has done the vetting for me. If it's on the shelf, then it's safe. That's just not the case. In America, we are the ones that are kind of the guinea pigs, unfortunately, because we don't have the precautionary principle like they do in Europe, where products are actually guilty until proven innocent. Here, products can go out on the shelf and they are innocent until enough people are harmed, until there's enough scientific data to then pull them. So we can't wait for that to happen. Unfortunately, cancer and autoimmune and autism and allergies, I mean, they are all at their all-time high in adults, but sadly, even children. And so we are kind of part of this experiment. And as parents, as people even just advocating for our own selves, we have to turn the bottles around. We have to start using our brains to really dissect the ingredients of the things that we're putting in our mouths and on our bodies and around our homes.
It's so important. And You mentioned so much there. I think one of the things that really honing in on this hormonal piece and how it can really delicately impact, it's going to impact all of our health. But there's a really interesting thread here. You mentioned all the things that are on the rise. Another thing that's on the rise is infertility. And I know you've had your history and your battles with that now and overcoming that naturally. You got into some of the big hitters, the fragrances and the pesticides. Do you think that common household items are contributing to infertility?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. And sadly, these are items that we use every single day. So when I tell people, or when we recommend to people, okay, where do you start? Well, let's start with the things that you are using in your home, washing your hands with, the sanitizers, the soaps, the hairsprays, the shampoos. I mean, sadly, women are definitely disproportionately affected because we just use more products. And so look at the daily offenders, and especially things like your water. Here I am holding up my glass water bottle, but that matters so much. And I want to lend hope here, because the hormonal system, while it's very delicate and while it can be so easily, I don't want to say damaged, but just negatively affected, it actually has the most potential for healing in the quickest amount of time. So when you hear about forever chemicals, PFOS, I mean, they are not as common, but once we are exposed to Teflons and, what is the spray that you put on your couch, the wrinkle-free, stain-proof, all those types of things. Those are called forever chemicals, and they're called that because their half-life is very, very, very long, and they stay in the body for a long time, almost like a heavy metal, and they're hard to get rid of. So the nice thing about these hormone disrupting chemicals, the phthalates, the plasticizers, that come from, like I said, the fragrances and the plastics, is that while they're ubiquitous, they're everywhere, they actually clear the body very beautifully and quickly. So we can drink out of plastic every day of our lives, and the day that we switch to glass, our body starts dumping like in super speed through our urine, usually CO2, sweat. Women actually have a fourth way of getting rid of chemicals, and that's through our menstrual period. So we do have a one up there against you guys.
Yep.
But it's amazing. I mean, there are studies that show that a group of people that they ate vegetable soup for 4 days, and the exact same soup, but it was from a can. So the same ingredients were made homemade, and then the next group was eating it from a can, and they had 400% more BPA in their system than the ones that were eating fresh soup. But as soon as they get rid of it, they start dumping it. So we actually do something called a 10-day stay in the company right now, where we actually have taken 5 or 4 people and we have removed them from their environment, from their clothes, from their fragrances. We've given them real food for 10 days, and we take their urine on day 0 and we take their urine on day 10. And the differences in the phthalates, the methylparabens, these hormone-related chemicals is unreal. I mean, it's just almost 100% better after not having exposure to these toxic chemicals. So anyone that is dealing with endometriosis, PCOS, infertility, anything endocrine related, I'm talking even, lumps under your breast or breast soreness, menstrual cramps. I mean, our period cramps that's not normal. Heavy body is not normal. So all of this is related to our hormone system, and all of it can be addressed for sure.
That's such an important point, and really hopeful, actually, that the body wants to heal. Like your Aunt Marilee told you, over a decade ago at this point, probably the OG version of a crunchy mama. Like the intelligence that designed the body can heal the body. You have to, it's in the power of removal so much. It's not even necessarily in the power of addition, like adding healthy things in to support the lymphatic system and the drainage in our elimination pathways, and a good clean diet, of course, but removal of a lot of this stuff really, really matters. And I'm thinking about, the painful cramps you just mentioned and things like that. These things that have become so pervasive that they're so normalized in our culture. My wife and I was chatting the other day how crazy it is that for years of her life, she put a cotton tampon inside of her vagina for 4 or 5 days every month, and that's non-organic cotton, and it was scented, and it's crazy because that's going inside your body. It's contributing to all kinds of things. What are some of the more practical things you've really mentioned? I think we can latch onto, like the hand soaps and the sanitizers and the things that smell because they smack you in the face. What are maybe some of the more like sneaky things that people just never think about in this realm?
People that use items with synthetic fragrances do not actually smell them because they have really become part of their body. They are in their bloodstream and they're embedded into the fibers of their clothes. I would actually say laundry is something that people do not realize the impact that it can have on our bodies. And I mean, these synthetic fragrances, I mean, I've been really focusing on the hormone system, but I want to step back and just say too, that they are known neurotoxins, they are known carcinogens, they are known obesogens. They actually affect our metabolic system. For those of you who are not familiar with the way that our body actually does this to protect our organs, but it actually sequesters these toxic chemicals into our fat cells. And it's actually really incredible because we don't want them all sludging up our liver and our kidneys and our thyroid. So a lot of times in this amazing kind of God design, we actually gain weight in response to the infiltration of these toxic chemicals. And so when we've reached kind of a max in the fat cell, it will either expand or duplicate. So a lot of people, once they get rid of these toxins, are like, I just lost 14 pounds. We're like, exactly. But so there's lots of different ways that these scents can really affect us. But I think that laundry is one of the biggest offenders, because once we use the same laundry detergent for even a few months, we stop really smelling it. You know, our body has something called maladaptation. And so the headaches we used to get, and the runny nose, and the eczema, and the ways that it could be affecting us in the long term, which we haven't directly seen at this point, actually our bodies can maladapt. So we now do not have those headaches and those red flags. And we think, oh, it's not affecting me. Well, it's not that it's not affecting you. It's that your body has actually started to work around these things. And we don't wake up one day and have infertility issues. I mean, there is always things working in the background, things like even cancer. I mean, it takes sometimes a lifetime for some people to manifest the symptoms of these chemicals. So number one, I would say fragrance. And once people remove the fragrance, they have the hardest time even being around it. I always make the analogy of smoking. You can smoke your whole life, and then, you get rid of the cigarettes and you can't even be around one cigarette from someone smoking. You're like, how did I do that for so long? So I think really it's about thinking about the everyday items. And even if you don't think they're affecting you, even if you do not smell them, get them out, and you will now notice that your body is giving you that quote unquote sensitivity. And I would call it a very positive sensitivity, because God has made us so that we can actually receive these symptoms and red flags, so that we know, hey, this is an alert. This is a danger zone. I need to get out,
Yeah, it's a really wonderful design. It's quite clearly pointing us to this isn't natural, and a lot of things that aren't natural are usually not that good for us. But like you said, if you're just used to it, I always use this bed of nails analogy. If you'd slept on a bed of nails for your entire life, and all of a sudden at 25 years old, somebody comes and gets you a nice organic cotton Japanese futon bed that you're like, oh, this is way more comfortable, but you didn't know. You don't know what you don't know. And I think you're very right. We just adapt to these things. So I think the case for removal is really the big one here. When we're thinking about removal, because you did mention that the thread of hope here is that your body can support you, and it will detox these things if you get rid of them and you support health and you do natural healthy behaviors. But one of the things that gets really scary are these forever chemicals that you mentioned. Where's a source of these? You mentioned Teflon. Like, how bad is conventional cookware?
Oh man. Yeah. It's one of those things that, again, especially if you're someone that cooks at home, you can have, the healthiest food and use the best oils. And gosh, we spend a lot of money on our food. Like, when we really do better, we do better. And I would say, my husband and I were talking about our budget last night. I'm like, it all goes to our food. And I have no regrets about that. But then when we put it on a pan that uses Teflon, we are literally embedding these forever chemicals into our food. And then we put it on a plate that was cleaned with a toxic, detergent, which we don't taste, like I said, because you've been using it forever. But then once you stop, you go to a friend's house and you're like, oh my gosh, I can taste the detergent on this plate, or I'm drinking out of the cup and I'm like, oh my goodness. But again, the forever chemicals are tasteless. And they are, like I said, they're sprayed on clothes. If ever you see a lot of outdoor furniture, stain resistant, wrinkle proof clothes like that. Especially anything that's going to go on your body inside your mouth, you really want to make sure that you can identify these top forever chemicals. But Teflon, they did a study once where they had birds that were in the same room, caged, while someone was cooking on a Teflon pan, and the birds actually died because of the forever chemicals that were being infiltrated into the air. Whoa. So those are the kind of chemicals that are going into our food. The forever chemicals they are a thing for sure. And they should definitely be something we look at. We have an article on our website with all of our suggestions for non-toxic cookware, if anyone's interested.
Excellent. Yeah, that's crazy. What do you use? Are you stainless steel, ceramic?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Those two, glass Yeah, stainless steel and ceramic. And once you invest in one, then, you never have to buy it again. I
Right.
mean, I absolutely love my cast iron as well, and they just get better with time. But I will say ceramic is my favorite. It cooks the most evenly, and our oxygen boost powder makes it really easy to clean. I mean, I tell you how many times I've left something on the stove or burned something, eggs, whatnot, and I just put some oxygen boost overnight, and that burn just comes right up.
So I've heard you have a really cool take on this idea that the dose makes the poison. And I think that's where a lot of people come to, it's like, well, it's just a little bit, and as long as it's not too much. But I guess in that analogy, like the example of the birds and the example of like these little particles, how much truth is there to the dose makes the poison, or is this just straight up poison from day one?
Yeah, I would say that obviously there is a lot of truth in the fact that the more we're exposed to something, the worse it can get. But I was actually recently listening to a scientist talking about how we expose rats in a lab, and that's how we figure out what amount of a certain ingredient can be in a product before it's deemed toxic. And so they were looking to see if it was going to be between 0 and 50 that the rats would die, or between 50 and 100. And they actually found that the rats were most affected between 0 and 1, which is crazy. And it could kind of leave us with this feeling of, oh my gosh, like, okay, why even try? I'm exposed to all these different things, But instead, I think we really need to remember that the body is so smart and it wants to heal. And we have strong detoxification organs because we will be exposed to things that we cannot control. And so if we can control the things that if we can do the good with the things that we can control, so the things that we, use inside of our homes, like I said, the detergents and the food, I mentioned supplements, but it's true. I mean, we have the power to make good decisions and not worry about all the other things. So I think that it's definitely something to consider when it comes to, we have so much of the power in ourselves, and we can no longer just blame genetics or blame, okay, well, my parents both had this, so I'm going to have this, or everyone else around me has this, I'm going to have this. Like, we can be different when we really start doing our own research.
Yeah, I love it. Very important. I wanted to circle back to something that was threaded in very early into your story, the birth control thing. And I don't know whether you saw recently the Washington Post article that was titled, "Women Are Getting Off Birth Control Amid Misinformation Explosion." So they're essentially gaslighting these women that are coming off birth control and trying to reclaim their health. What's your take on birth control? Do you think birth control is harming women?
Oh, goodness. I haven't been asked this one. I may get some controversy here. I do. I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of it. It is a synthetic estrogen. And so I think personally that when we take birth control, we are again kind of putting a Band-Aid on the deeper issue. Why are we taking it? And if it's purely just to abstain from having children, there are definitely other ways that can be done, and that our bodies are meant to, be able to address that without having to take a negative blow. Why should a woman be just deluging her body with synthetic hormones just to prevent not getting pregnant? That doesn't seem like the natural way. I mean, I always go back to, what was God thinking, and how have we diverged from that? Are we trying to take matters into our own hands here? So by no means am I saying, okay, everyone just does, like natural family planning, go, find a Catholic and have them tell you how to, do a family. Like, that's not what I'm saying. But I also think that so many times people are on birth control because they're actually trying to cover an issue, like me. I mean, that was me for 4 years. I took birth control and I was not trying to avoid having kids. I was not sexually active. I was literally doing it to force a period. Well, why was I not getting my period? And so I talked to so many women, even today. I mean, it's crazy. Very recently, I was speaking to someone who has polycystic ovarian syndrome and was told the same thing as me. And here we are 14 years later. I'm like, have we learned nothing? She was told, get on birth control. And so I said to her very respectfully, I'm like, look, she hadn't even filled the prescription. And she and I got on the phone together and I said, look, this is your body, but I just highly recommend that you do some research. And we have to understand that these doctors don't have the time, the capacity. They're not taught this in medical school. We can't blame them. This is what they're taught to do when there is an issue like amenorrhea or bad cramps or whatever it is, to just hand out birth control. But I think that, we also have to remember that just because we stop birth control and we're now ready to start a family, let's say we get pregnant that following month or even a couple months later, we have not done any of the work to try to then kind of recalibrate our bodies and to open up those endocrine pathways to get rid of all those synthetic estrogens. So I just would pose the question, like, how is that affecting our babies? And how does that affect their ability to deal with their own hormones? And I just think that there is definitely a negative domino effect for how quickly we are just handing out synthetic estrogen to even young children. I had to tell this one story. I have a customer who she has twin girls, but a couple of years ago, she called me and one of her 6-year-old daughters was having pubic hair, so early puberty symptoms. And of course, she goes to the top, fertility doctor here in Houston, and they do a panel and they say, okay, yeah, there's some, something off with her hormones, but there's really nothing you can do about it. This is actually becoming really common. So just because it's common doesn't mean it's normal. And just go back home, monitor it. Well, what am I supposed to monitor, right? What am I supposed to do with this information? And we'll just keep checking her. I love that. It's just keep coming back every couple of months and we'll just keep testing it, even though we're not changing anything. So she calls me and she says, I know you're going to not agree. I know you're going to say there's something I can do. And sure enough, this is someone who has the Austin air purifiers and the organic mattresses and uses Branch Basics. You can have all the things in your home that are good, but it's what you also have that could be undermining our health, right? And that's why we're all about removal. Don't just go out and say, I'm going to live a non-toxic lifestyle and think it's really expensive because you have to buy all these things. It's not expensive. It's actually about removal. And so I said, okay, I need to know about any smells in your house. She's like, Allison, I don't buy any of that stuff. Like, we use glass containers. Like, we don't do any of the plastics. But sure enough, like I said, that age, child, especially girls, like, they just gather all these things from parties and friends and stuff. So she went to their room and she was like, I was shocked at how many scented items there were. Took them all out. Within 6 weeks, she calls me back. The pubic hair had not only stopped growing, it had fallen out.
Whoa.
And her panel was normal. Hormone panel was just like her twin sister. So I will say that is an example. A lot of people come to us and they say, oh, but everyone else does it. Or this person wasn't affected in this way. We are all different. The way that our constitution, our metabolism, our detoxification organs, whether or not we have the genetic mutation MTHFR can keep us from being able to detoxify chemicals the same way. Whether we had received a vaccination when we were little, when we were really sick, and maybe our twin didn't receive that same vaccine. We just never know. And so our bodies are very different. We cannot compare ourselves to the next person and say, well, they've been doing this forever and didn't affect them,
Yeah.
So that's just an example of how much our bodies are affected, but then how quickly they actually can heal, especially with, the hormone issues. And I would say that the birth control is a big one.
I mean, considering that was the first time you'd been asked about birth control, I think you crushed it. And it very much aligns with other experts that we've had on the show, people that really dive deep into this. And so I guess we are collectively banging the drum of this dangerous misinformation of women re-empowering themselves to get off this. Because like you said, it's synthetic and it's usually the Band-Aid on the bullet wound. It was the same story for my wife. It's the same story for hundreds of people listening to this show. And if that's dangerous misinformation and it's making people healthier, well, paint me that, because I'm okay with that,
Sorry, not sorry. And what else is it covering that could then show up later as an endocrine cancer, a breast, or it's that too. I mean, 1 in 3 women will get cancer in their lifetime, and a lot of times it's an endocrine related cancer. And so we don't realize, I mean, back in the day, they gave what DDS was a supplement that was given to women, and it actually has been shown to affect the second generation. So they call DDS daughters actually for the granddaughters of the people who took this. And so
Wow.
I'd be part of this experiment. We don't want to be one of those people.
Well, it also, that kind of like adds to this trope in our culture that I don't know whether your parents have ever said something similar to you, or grandparents, where they say, well, we did all of this stuff you're saying don't do, and we turned out fine and you turned out fine. But then if you actually look at the data, what does fine mean now? Because fine means you're sick and you probably have a couple of autoimmune diseases and we're dying earlier and our cancer rates have exploded. So we didn't turn out fine, did we? And if we carry on with that same lineage of thinking, maybe it's being passed down epigenetically. It's been passed down through placentas, through these babies that are developing. It's kind of crazy. So we absolutely cannot do what we've always done and expect it to be any different. That's Einstein's definition of insanity, right? And maybe also that we're just adding more and more of these toxins, more and more of these poisons. So it isn't the same as it was 50 years ago. It's actually worse too.
Oh gosh, it's much worse. I mean, they had what in the vaccine schedule back then, the amount of toxic chemicals back then. Food was just food. Now it has, in order to be called food, we have to buy, in order to still have the food that our grandparents ate, we actually have to buy organic.
Yes.
We're just trying to eat the same things that they ate, but now we have to pay more for it. And sometimes we sound like snobs or bougie. And I'm like, my grandfather, literally on his deathbed, was like, I just don't understand all this organic stuff. I'm like, Dandy, I'm literally trying to just eat the same hamburger you did. There's just nothing. I just don't like pesticides. And then, to add to that, and here's a bomb, EMFs. So everything we're doing that they did, let's amplify that, because now we have put this electromagnetic field that is literally pulsating and replicating cancer cells. You expose cancer cells to EMFs and then cancer cells to no EMFs, and the Petri dish with the EMFs is going to vibrate and duplicate at a much greater speed. So I never ever want to leave people in fear. It's always about freedom. It's always about ignorance is not bliss. Knowledge is power. And I am living proof of that.
Yeah, I've heard you say in the past that before you are a brand selling a product, you're an education company and you're just trying to spread this message. And like, that's it. Education can be motivation. Don't listen to this and think, oh my God, the sky is falling, right? There is a lot of stuff out there that is toxic. There is a lot of stuff that's contributing to our declining health, but that should hopefully be a empowering message in the sense that you're in control of it. Like you said, all the way back, the first time Marilee asked you what you were doing was the first time anybody actually put the locus of control back on you. Like, oh, I can change this and I can change that. There is a lot of crazy stuff. You mentioned many of the impacts there, but there is also, you control it. You can fight back against this stuff. You can reclaim your health and be a rebel in a very sick world. And I think that's super, super important and a really, poignant point that we need to, start wrapping this conversation with. Like, it's not all doom and gloom. It's not all hopeless. There are just very real problems, and we have to take a stand for our health and the health of our families.
No. And listen, if I could just open the curtain to all of our direct messages and our Slack channel with our community of our Toss the Toxins participants, it's not doom and gloom. It's not stressful. Right. Yes, of course, there's moments of stress, but I'll tell you one thing. It is a finite process to create a healthy home. It is not one of those every single day I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what else is there? Once you go through the process of identifying or removing chemicals, it's done. That's it. You could have a leak and create some mold or something. I'm not talking about a situation like that, but I'm talking about our products we bring inside our home. Diet is a whole other thing. I will say it is a decision that we make every single day, what we put inside our mouths. But if you go back and, like I said, if you're looking at all the messages and the emails that we get, there is so much hope. There is so much freedom. There is so much good in having information and being empowered. And once you taste how well, your body can do, not being so deluged with these chemicals, your energy levels, you don't have that afternoon slump, you're sleeping, but you're not just sleeping. It's like a deep, restful, restorative sleep. You're not battling constant allergies. How many times do people say, gosh, maybe it wasn't allergies or asthma, maybe the detergent, because all of a sudden I'm off my inhaler. We had someone doing the 10-day stay and they'd been on an inhaler for decades, 5 times a day. They would use it. By day 3, they were off of it and have not been on since. That was 5 months ago.
Wow.
So she literally made that connection. My goodness, it was all the perfumes and the detergents and all the things that I just was told was asthma.
Yeah, like that freedom that comes with the health and the vibrancy that you can feel. Like I feel genuinely a lot of the times in life like I have unlimited energy. Like I can just go and go and go. And it's not from a frantic, stressed out energy. It's like this vibrancy that exudes off me now that wasn't always the case. And I think you mentioned something earlier that basically the energy that we could have and funnel back into our lives and our families and our work and our passions is being all spent up trying to detox by trying not to die because you're overburdened. Like your bucket is overflowing. And if we just mindfully can punch a few more holes in this to drain it, I think we're onto something really powerful. But I have to ask you, because you mentioned the M word, which is a new one, mold. Like sometimes that's a hidden thing, right? Is there hope for someone that sees signs of mold in the house? Or how would you remove mold from the home? What might somebody be thinking about there?
Okay, so do you have like 2 more hours or?
Yes, we've got as much time as we need for the mold monster.
Oh man, this is one topic. Actually, EMFs and mold are two things that we really haven't delved into in terms of our blog and education series, because we really hesitate to give advice and health advice in terms of like a supplement program. We always say, okay, here's some basics you can take, but we can't give, because everybody is so different and every mold situation is so different. So it really depends on the source. If you have found the source, amazing. We always tell people never, ever see mold or hire someone to come out that sees mold and is going to kill it. You remove it. You remove every single thing around it. You get, it's just like if you were to remove a mole, you're not going to just put something on it and hope it goes away. You remove the borders. I mean, you go after it, because no mold or no mildew or, oh, it smells like my grandmother's house, smells like an old library. None of that is good. It's releasing mycotoxins into your air that go into your body. I mean, you can do a Great Plains lab or a Vibrant lab. You can do a simple urinalysis and you can see that the mold in your home is very clearly present in your body. And mold just pretty much is the devil. That's all I got to say. I mean, I'm a Christian. I'm like, you can look in the Bible and they're like, burn it, get out. I'm like, I agree. It has ruined our families, things and seasons of our lives now 3 different times. So
wow.
I can say mold is definitely something that needs to be taken seriously. And you need to hire an expert that really understands what they're doing and that can really identify to the point that if you need to drill holes in your walls to test behind your walls, like for instance, in Texas, you don't need to touch behind the walls. You can just test the home's air. And if it doesn't have mold, it doesn't have mold. Okay, well then what's happening behind that wall that's actually into your HVAC system? And most of our homes are, older and they're not tight. They're not, very airtight. And so whatever's behind your wall is getting into your home's air. And I will say it is worth every penny to hire someone that really knows what they're doing, an air expert that understands the connection between mold and health, not someone that is just going to come out and give you clearance because you just want to feel good about your home. It's always very important. So you always want to check if there's any sort of, water damage or any sort of, visible, if there's visible mold, that it's definitely gone too far. We've been in that situation one time. But for instance, we were just dealing with mold recently. None of it was visible.
Right.
But we had them come out and they drilled little bitty holes in our walls and they found it and we were able to source it and figure out what the issue was. But it's always something to definitely take very seriously, because mold can basically make whatever symptoms in your body, it can amplify it.
Yeah, it's a super deep rabbit hole. I'm pretty sure the home that we moved into recently has a little bit of mold, and that's, bringing up some symptoms. And it's, I think some crazy statistics, like almost 50% of the homes in the US will have some mold. So you've got a 1 in 2 chance of being exposed to it. I think another really important point there is to do as much as you possibly can to make your physical body as healthy as you possibly can, even though like everything you said, I think is really important, including the fact that if you know that this is an issue, even though it could be an expensive issue to fix, it is worth it in the end. It's not a cost as much as it's an investment. And I think that's similar about any products, any premium product that promotes health, similar to our products here on the shelf behind me, similar to Branch Basics, right? It might be more expensive than the conventional version, but what is it costing you to not have these things? What is it costing you to just go to the conventional route and ignore them? Well, it's costing you your health. It's costing you potentially years off your life, or it's certainly costing you energy on a day-to-day standpoint. So think of these things as, yes, nobody wants a home full of mold, and nobody wants to have to drop hundreds or maybe even thousands of dollars on something. But if it's going to give you back your life and it's going to give your family health, then maybe that's a worthy investment, and we say you never regret investing in yourself and your health, because health is wealth.
It is. And mold is one of those things that can manifest in every child. I mean, you could have 7 people in a family and 2 of them, they're not having any symptoms yet.
Yeah.
They're maladapting for sure. They're not having any symptoms. And then you have someone with quote unquote asthma, allergies. You have someone that's constantly clearing their throat or getting headaches or dizzy or, sleeplessness. You just never know, or even ticks, tremors. I mean, mold is a neurotoxin. It's a very, very strong, powerful neurotoxin. So it's going to affect our brain. So, but like you said, the more, like if you have mold, but you also have a toxic home, listen, you're just getting double whammy. So you might as well, if you know there's a mold issue, the very first thing you should do is remove the toxins from your home, because all you're doing is you're now allowing your body the freedom to really address the detoxification of that mold issue instead of being so usurped by just this deluge of chemicals. So what we're trying to do is just lessen the body burden so that we can, like I said, run in the direction of healing.
So bringing it home and bringing it full circle, one of the things that you do offer, apart from an amazing story and an incredible amount of education and hope and information, is the product itself. So let's kind of close on that. You've mentioned that it's a non-toxic cleaning product. Where can people go to learn more about Branch Basics? What is the product? How does it work? And tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So if you're not familiar, we have a 32-ounce liquid cleaning concentrate, and it's replaces basically every single thing in your home in terms of cleaning. It works. I mean, that's the amazing part, is that it's not just non-toxic, and it's like, okay, but is it really going to remove the grease, remove the stains, and remove the grime, and remove the germs? Yes, 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 and yes. And we also sell these empty bottles. So you can either get empty glass or empty plastic in your starter kit. I always want to start off with a starter kit because it is the one and only time that you will ever purchase those bottles. So each bottle, all purpose, bathroom, streak-free, hand soap, and laundry will all have fill lines on the label. So you'll fill mostly with water and then a certain ratio of soap of the concentrate to the water. And it makes it really easy because everything is coming from that one concentrate. And like I said, I mean, you're washing your hands, washing your baby's bottom, all the way to your windows, your dishes, your produce, removing your eye makeup and doing your laundry and removing stains, all with this one concentrate that is completely safe and effective. And so you never have to buy those bottles again. So it's very green, very sustainable. And it actually is, when it goes down to ounce per ounce to ounce, it's actually less expensive than buying conventional cleaning products because of the model of only buying the concentrate and refilling. And then we have the Oxygen Boost, which is like a non-toxic OxyClean, sodium bicarbonate, sodium percarbonate. So basically like an amped up baking soda. And you add that to laundry to boost your whites and brighten your brights. Excuse me. And then for grout that's really grimy, you can use the Oxygen Boost. I love it for stain removal. I just dump I'm talking any stain, tomato, poop, grease. I just put it in a sink with a little splash of concentrate and a scoop of Oxygen Boost and pull them out the next day. And they're usually completely stain free. And great for pots and pans. Like I mentioned earlier, if you burn your pots and pans or if you have a porcelain sink, you really only need the concentrate and the Oxygen Boost. It's like the dynamic duo, and everything can be found on branchbasics.com. We sell direct to consumer. We have a handful of stores, but mostly online. And you can follow us. Like you said, we are 100% by far an education company before a products company. So we would love if you would sign up for our newsletter or follow us on Instagram. My co-founder Kelly and myself are very present on our Instagram feed, and we spend a ton of time really going through our content calendar and making sure that everything is just up to snuff with the latest research. And a lot of Marilee's 40 years of consulting with clients pretty much boiled down to our feed.
Yeah, it's so good. I love it. Your Instagram account is amazing. The resources that you provide are excellent. The product is incredible. I can confirm here at Heart and Soil HQ, we have been branch pilled. Everything here is Branch Basics, and we love it, and it's badass, and it's super cool to have products that we know are clean and helping us thrive outside of just what we often talk about, which is the diet. It's very holistic, and I appreciate you. I appreciate the message, and I appreciate your story, and I hope that our listener, I'm sure the listener got a lot from this today. So thank you very much, Allison.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed this so much.
All right, friends, stay clean, stay green, stay toxic free, and we'll see you next week on the show. Peace out. All right, friends, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Radical Health Radio. We got a fresh new podcast for you every Wednesday. If you enjoyed the show, consider liking, subscribing, reviewing, and rating us on your podcast platform. It helps to spread this message of radical health. We'll see you next week.